They cut down my trees while I was at work, and they didn't even bother asking. So I blocked the only road that led to their million-dollar homes. And yeah, it got ugly real fast. I didn't plan any of it, not at first. That morning started like any other Tuesday. Coffee a little too bitter, radio mumbling something about traffic I wasn't even listening to, and I remember thinking I'd get home early, maybe grill something out back, sit under those trees like I always did. Those trees mattered more than I ever admitted out loud. 6 old white oaks lining the east side of my property, tall enough to cast shade over half the yard by late afternoon. Been there longer than I had, longer than the house probably. My dad used to say they were the only reason this land still felt like land and not just another address. Around noon, my phone rang. It was my younger sister, Abby. She never calls in the middle of the day unless something's off. I picked up, and right away I could hear it in her voice, shaky, tight, like she was trying not to cry. She said, "Ethan, you need to come home. Right now." I asked her what happened, but she wouldn't explain, just kept saying, "Please, just come home." So I left work early, didn't even clock out properly, just grabbed my keys and drove faster than I should have. Mind racing through worst-case scenarios, break-in, fire, something with the house. I didn't even consider the trees. Not once. When I turned onto my road, I felt it before I saw it, that weird, hollow drop in your gut, like something's out of place. And then I saw the yard, or what was left of it. The trees were gone. Not trimmed, not damaged, gone. All 6 of them. Clean cuts at the base, stumps sitting there like open wounds in the dirt, sawdust still scattered like someone had just finished the job an hour ago. The sky looked bigger, wrong somehow, like it wasn't supposed to be that open. I just sat in the truck for a second, engine still running, hands gripping the wheel, trying to process what I was looking at. Abby came out from the porch, arms wrapped around herself. "I didn't know what to do," she said. "They just showed up this morning, trucks, chainsaws. I thought you hired them." I shook my head, got out slowly, walked over to the nearest stump, and just stared at it. You could still smell the fresh cut wood, that sharp, almost sweet smell. That's when I noticed the business card tucked under my windshield wiper. Redwood Valley Tree Company. I picked it up, flipped it over, hands already tightening. No note, no explanation, just a name and a number. I called right there, standing in the dirt where my trees used to be. Guy picked up on the second ring, sounded casual, like it was any other job. I said, "Yeah, I'm calling about the trees you just cut down on County Road 18. Who authorized that?" There was a pause, papers shuffling maybe. Then he said, "That was a scheduled removal, sir. Order came through from the Pine Ridge Estates HOA." I frowned. "Pine Ridge what?" "Pine Ridge Estates Homeowners Association," he repeated. "We had a work order on file." I let out a short laugh, but there was nothing funny about it. "You might want to check that file again. I don't live in Pine Ridge Estates." Silence. Then, quieter this time, "You don't?" "No," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I live downhill from it. Different property, different land. Those trees you just cut down? They were mine." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear the gears turning on his end. "Sir, let me call you back," he said finally. I didn't bother arguing with him. What was the point? The damage was already done. I hung up and started walking the edge of my property, following the line where those trees used to stand. That's when it really clicked. Pine Ridge Estate sat up on the hill behind my land. Gated community, big houses, clean streets. The kind of place where every lawn looks like it's been measured with a ruler. They built it about 5 years ago, bought up the land behind mine, carved it into perfect little lots, sold the idea of privacy and panoramic valley views. Except my trees, they blocked that view. And now they didn't. I remember looking up toward the hill, toward those houses you could barely see through the distance, and thinking, this wasn't a mistake. Not really. Abby came up beside me. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer right away. I just kept staring at the empty space where the trees had been, trying to figure out why this felt like more than just property damage, like something personal. "I'm going to find out who signed that order," I said finally. That afternoon, I drove up to the entrance of Pine Ridge Estates. Big stone sign out front, iron gates, security keypad, the whole package. I hit the call button and waited. A voice came through the speaker, flat and bored. "Pine Ridge Security." "Yeah," I said. "I need to speak with whoever authorized tree removal along the south boundary this morning." There was a pause. "Do you live in Pine Ridge, sir?" No, I said. But someone in there just cut down 6 trees on my property, so I think that earns me a conversation. Another pause, longer this time. Hold, please. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes before the gate finally buzzed open, just enough for me to pull into the visitor lane. They didn't let me pass the front office, though. Instead, they took my name, my number, and told me someone from the HOA would contact me. I drove back home with that same tight feeling in my chest, like something bigger was coming, and I wasn't wrong. About 2 hours later, my phone rang. Ethan Cole, the voice on the other end asked. Yeah, this is Daniel Mercer. I'm the acting president of the Pine Ridge Estates HOA. His tone was polished, controlled, the kind of voice that's used to being in charge of things. I understand there's been some confusion regarding tree removal this morning, he continued. I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the empty yard. Confusion's one way to put it. He cleared his throat. We were under the impression those trees were located on common land adjacent to our property line. It appears that may not have been the case. May not have been. I repeated. They were on my land. Has been for decades. Yes, well, in light of that, the HOA is prepared to reimburse you for the cost of the removal. I actually smiled at that. Not because it was funny, but because it told me exactly how he saw this. You mean you'll pay me back for cutting down something I never asked you to cut? A slight pause. We're offering a reasonable resolution. I sat there for a second, then said, let me ask you something, Daniel. How much do you think a 40-year-old oak tree is worth? Silence. Because I don't think you're talking about the same thing I am. He didn't answer right away, and in that silence, I started to realize something else. Something he hadn't mentioned. Something he probably didn't even think mattered. And that's when this stopped being about trees and started becoming something else entirely. He didn't answer my question about the trees right away, and that silence on the line, it told me everything I needed to know. To him, this was a paperwork problem, a line item, something you fix with a check and a polite email. To me, it was something else entirely. I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the open stretch of dirt where Shade used to live, and I could feel something shifting inside me. Slow at first, then sharper. Look, Daniel finally said, voice tightening just a bit. We're willing to discuss compensation that reflects the value of the trees. Good, I said, because we're not even close yet. We went back and forth for a couple minutes, him trying to keep it clean and professional, me asking questions he didn't really want to answer, and somewhere in the middle of it, a memory surfaced, something I hadn't thought about in years. When I bought this place, the realtor had mentioned, almost in passing, that there was some kind of informal access agreement with the land uphill. I didn't think much of it at the time. The previous owner, an old guy named Walter Briggs, had lived here forever, and from what I understood, he'd been the kind of man who settled things with handshakes instead of contracts. Good fences make good neighbors, unless you don't build the fence. I remember asking, is there an easement recorded? The realtor shrugged. Doesn't look like it, but they've been using that road for years. And that was it. I didn't press further. At the time, it didn't seem important. Now it did. I cut Daniel off mid-sentence. Hey, quick question. Yes. That main road into Pine Ridge, the one that runs down the hill and connects to County Road 18. Yes, he said, slower now. That road crosses my land, doesn't it? There was a pause, not long, but just enough. It follows the established access route. Yes, he said carefully. That's not what I asked, I replied. Does it cross my property line? Another pause. Longer this time. I'd have to review the plats to confirm. It does, I said, cutting him off. I walked that line this afternoon. Silence again. And this one felt different. I could almost picture him sitting there, posture changing, that confident tone slipping just a little as he started connecting dots he hadn't bothered to look at before. I'll need to verify that, he said finally. Go ahead, I told him. Take your time. We ended the call not long after that, but my mind didn't stop. I pulled out the folder with my property documents, spread everything across the kitchen table, old maps, survey sketches, closing papers, and I started looking closer than I ever had before. And there it was, clear as day. My land wrapped around the base of that hill, including a 15-foot wide stretch where the only paved road into Pine Ridge Estates cut through. No recorded easement, no legal right-of-way, just a strip of asphalt sitting on land that belonged to me. I actually laughed when I saw it. Not loud, not dramatic, just this quiet, almost disbelieving kind of laugh. 5 years. 4 or 5 years, they'd been driving over my property like it was theirs, and nobody ever thought to make it official. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was angry anymore. That part had settled into something colder, more focused. I kept thinking about those trees, about the way they'd just decided they were in the way and removed them. No conversation, no permission, like I didn't matter. And I realized something. If they wanted to treat my land like it was invisible, I could make it very, very visible. The next morning, I called a surveyor. By noon, he was out there with his equipment, walking the boundaries, marking lines with bright orange flags and wooden stakes. I followed him part of the time, asking questions, making sure I understood exactly where everything fell. "You're sure about this line?" I asked, pointing to where the road cut through. He nodded. "Positive. According to county records, this section here, it's yours. And there's no easement?" He flipped through his notes. Nothing recorded. If there was ever an agreement, it wasn't filed. That was all I needed. By the time he left, the property line was marked clearly enough that even someone driving by at 40 miles an hour could see it. And right across that line sat the road. I made a couple more calls that afternoon. Fencing company, supply yard, a guy I knew who could get things done quickly if you didn't ask too many questions. 8 feet, I told him. Chain link, steel posts. I want it solid. He whistled low. "That's not exactly decorative." "Good," I said. "I'm not decorating." We started the next day. It wasn't subtle. Trucks pulling in, posts being driven into the ground, metal clanging, the kind of noise that carries. By mid-afternoon, anyone coming in or out of Pine Ridge would have seen exactly what was happening. A fence going up, straight across the only road they had. I stood there most of the time, arms crossed, watching it take shape. Part of me wondered if someone would show up, try to stop it, but nobody did. Not that day. By Tuesday evening, it was done. 8 feet tall, stretched clean across the asphalt, anchored firmly on my side of the property line. In the center, a heavy-duty gate with a thick steel chain and a lock that clicked shut with a kind of finality I felt all the way in my chest. I tested it once, just to be sure, pulled it closed, snapped the lock into place. That sound, it was louder than it should have been. Wednesday morning, I woke up to my phone vibrating non-stop on the nightstand. Calls, texts, unknown numbers. A couple from neighbors I actually knew, asking what the hell was going on. I let it ring for a while, made coffee, took my time. Eventually, I answered one. "Daniel." "Ethan," he said, and just from that one word I could hear it, the change. The control was gone. "You need to remove that fence immediately." I took a sip of coffee. "Morning to you too." "This isn't a joke," he snapped. "You've blocked the only access road into Pine Ridge. People can't get to work, kids can't get to school." "Sounds inconvenient," I said. "You can't do this." "I already did." There was a sharp exhale on the other end. "This is illegal." I actually smiled. "Is it?" "Yes," he said, but there was hesitation now. Because I checked, I continued. "There's no recorded easement. No right-of-way. That road crosses private property, my property. You're interfering with access to a residential community," he argued. "I'm standing on my land," I said. "That's not interference. That's ownership." Silence again, but this time it wasn't confusion. It was pressure. "I'm calling our attorney," he said finally. "Good idea," I replied. "You should have done that before you cut down my trees." He hung up after that. I set the phone down, walked out onto the porch, and looked out toward the fence. Even from a distance, you could see it, a hard line where there hadn't been one before. About an hour later, I heard it. The first car pulling up, stopping short at the gate. Then another, and another. By midday, there was a line. People getting out of their vehicles, walking up to the fence, some of them staring, some of them already on their phones. I could see the confusion turning into frustration, frustration turning into anger. A man in a suit slammed his car door harder than necessary, walked up to the gate, and shook it like that was going to do something. "Hey," he shouted toward my house. "You can't block this road." I walked halfway down the driveway, not in a rush. "Looks blocked to me," I said. "This is a private community access road." "No," I replied calmly. "This is a private piece of land. You've just been using it." He stared at me like I'd just insulted him personally. "Do you have any idea who lives up there?" I shrugged. "People who should have checked their paperwork." He didn't like that. None of them did. By the afternoon, the calls started again. But this time, they sounded different. Less demanding. More careful. And just before sunset, my phone rang once more. Daniel. I let it ring twice before answering. Ethan, he said, and this time, there was no edge in his voice. Just something tight, controlled, like he was choosing every word. We need to talk. I leaned against the porch railing, watching the last of the cars turn around at the gate. Yeah, I said. I think we do. Yeah, I said. I think we do. There was a pause on the line, the kind where you can almost hear someone recalibrating who they're talking to, like he'd finally realized I wasn't just some guy he could smooth over with a polite tone and a check. When can we meet? Daniel asked. I looked out toward the fence again. By then, most of the cars had cleared out, but you could still feel the tension sitting in the air, like something unresolved. Tomorrow morning, I said. 9. At the gate. He agreed without arguing. That alone told me how much things had shifted. The next morning, I got there a few minutes early. Coffee in hand, jeans, boots, nothing fancy. I didn't need to dress up for this. The fence stood exactly where I left it, quiet, solid, doing its job. At exactly 9, a black SUV rolled up on the other side. Clean, expensive, the kind of car that doesn't get dust on it unless it has to. Daniel stepped out, mid-40s maybe, pressed shirt, the kind of guy who probably hadn't been told no very often in his life. He walked up to the gate, stopped a few feet back like there was an invisible line he didn't want to cross. Ethan, he said, offering a nod. Daniel. For a second, neither of us spoke. Just stood there with 8 feet of chain link between us, which honestly felt about right. He glanced at the fence, then back at me. This is a bit extreme. I took a sip of coffee. So was cutting down 6 trees that weren't yours. He exhaled slowly, like he'd rehearsed this part. We made a mistake. You did. And we're prepared to make it right. I tilted my head slightly. You tried that already. That was before we understood the full situation, he said. We've since reviewed the property records. Good for you. Another pause. He shifted his weight, then got straight to it. We'll replace the trees, he said. All 6. Mature oaks, professionally sourced and planted. We'll cover the full cost, including long-term care to ensure they take root properly. I didn't respond right away. Just let the offer sit there. Keep going, I said finally. He nodded once, like he expected that. We'll also issue a formal written apology from the HOA, acknowledging the error and the damage caused. Still not enough. That one landed. I could see it in the slight tightening of his jaw. Ethan, he said, a little more firmly. We're trying to resolve this in good faith. And I'm giving you the chance to, I replied. But you're still thinking small. He looked at me, really looked this time, like he was trying to figure out where the line was, and realizing it wasn't where he thought. What exactly are you asking for, he said. I set my coffee down on the fence post, stepped a little closer. Let's start with something simple, I said. That road, the one behind you, it's been running through my land for 5 years without permission. He opened his mouth to respond, but I kept going. You didn't just take my trees, Daniel. You've been taking access. Every single day, quietly, like it was just yours. That wasn't intentional, he said quickly. That was the developer. I don't care whose oversight it was. I cut in. It's your problem now. Silence again. Not the uncertain kind from before. This was heavier. So here's how this works, I continued. You want that road open again? Then we do this properly. He didn't interrupt. We draw up a legal easement. Recorded. Filed. Clear terms. And you pay for it. His expression didn't change much, but I could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. What kind of terms? He asked. I held his gaze. $2,000 a month. That did it. He blinked. Just once. But it was enough. That's excessive, he said carefully. No, I replied. What's excessive is assuming you can use someone's land for free. It's a residential access road, he argued. This isn't a commercial lease. And this isn't public property, I shot back. You want access? You pay for access. He ran a hand over the back of his neck, pacing once along the inside of the fence, then stopping again. You're putting an entire community in a difficult position, he said. I shrugged slightly. You already did that. I'm just the one holding the key. That one hung in the air. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. A car pulled up behind him, stopped, then slowly backed away when they saw the two of us standing there. Finally, he looked back at me. If we agree to this, the easement, the monthly payment, you'll remove the fence? Once everything's signed and filed, I said. Not before. And the trees. Replaced. Properly. Not saplings. I want them as close to what you took as possible. He nodded slowly. And that's it. I thought about it for a second. About the trees. About my dad. About the way that yard used to feel. That's it, I said. He extended his hand instinctively, then seemed to remember the fence between us and let it drop awkwardly. I'll need to present this to the board, he said. Do that, I replied. But don't take too long. He gave a tight nod, turned, and walked back to his SUV. I stood there for a while after he left, just listening to the quiet. No chainsaws, no traffic, just wind moving through space that used to be filled with leaves. It took them 2 days. 2 days of what I can only imagine were some very uncomfortable conversations up in those big houses on the hill, because by Friday afternoon, Daniel called me back. We'll agree to your terms, he said, no preamble this time. All of them. I didn't say anything for a second. Just let that settle. Good, I said. The paperwork took another week. Lawyers got involved, documents drafted, reviewed, revised. This time, everything was done properly. Signed, filed, recorded with the county. And the moment I had a copy of that easement in my hand, I went out to the gate. The lock clicked open a lot quieter than it had when I first closed it. I pulled the chain loose, swung the gate wide, and stepped back as the first car rolled through slowly, like they weren't entirely sure it was real. No one waved. No one said thank you. That was fine. A few weeks later, the trees arrived. Not identical. Not really. You can't replace 40 years overnight. But they were big, healthy, planted carefully by a crew that moved a whole lot more respectfully than the last one. I stood there while they worked, arms crossed again, but this time, it felt different. Not victory, exactly. Just balance. These days, the yard is starting to feel like itself again. Not the same, but close enough that I can sit out there in the evening and not think about what's missing every second. And every month, like clockwork, a payment shows up. $2,000. For a road they used to think was free. Now, here's the thing I still go back and forth on. Did I go too far? I mean, yeah, they were wrong. No question about that. You don't walk onto someone's land and start cutting things down just because they're in your way. But at the same time, I didn't just fix the problem. I made sure they felt it. Every inconvenience, every delay, every uncomfortable conversation. Part of me says that's justice. Another part of me wonders if it was something else. So I'm curious what you think. If someone crossed a line like that on your property, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments, because I've heard both sides, and honestly, I'm still not sure where I land.